Well, joining us now is Derek Muller, election law professor at the University of Notre Dame. Derek, thanks so much for being on today. We appreciate it. So talk to us about the appeal process, what it entails, and how long it could take.
Right. So right now, the Colorado Republican Party has appealed the decision out of Colorado. Trump is expected maybe today, maybe tomorrow to file an appeal as well. There'll be an appeal of the Maine decision in the Maine courts, but we're watching that Colorado Supreme Court decision appeal to the United States Supreme Court. We think that they'll probably have the last word on that. But ballots are being printed and they're going to be mailed out and distributed. The Iowa caucuses are in a matter of days. Voters need to know these things. So I think the Supreme Court is going to move very quickly, but probably a matter of weeks. But that might be a little bit of time to develop the record and allow an oral argument to take place and issue a decision.
And, that being said, what happens if SCOTUS doesn't rule very quickly on this? What could happen? What could be the fallout?
So formally, right, Colorado and Maine have stayed their rulings to say he can remain on the ballot while these appeals are pending. So formally, his name's going to appear on the ballot. But I think there's a risk that more states sort of fall in line. Colorado was the first one to do this 2 weeks ago, and then Maine was the one that did it last week. And there might be other challenges in Oregon and some other states that have new filing deadlines. There's a chance that he's excluded from the ballot in more states. And I think it leaves voters questioning, am I voting for a candidate who's disqualified or who my vote will not count in this state? Should I be looking at Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley or somebody else to cast my ballot for? So it's an open question, and I think a reason why the Supreme Court is going to feel the pressure to issue a decision as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and there are also currently lawsuits pending in more than a dozen states to take former President Trump, that is, off the ballot. What do you think happens in those cases, and how might this possible ruling from the Supreme Court in Trump's appeal, how could it impact those cases, if at all?
Right. So right now, that Colorado decision a couple of weeks ago was very influential in Maine for when the Maine Secretary of State issued her decision. And now you've got two decisions against the former president. You can see that snowballing in other states as other judiciaries look at this and say, we don't have to be the first one. We don't have to be the second one. And in fact, we've got a lot of reasoning from these other states that allows us to sort of piggyback and exclude him and keep him off the ballot. That said, the United States Supreme Court is the final word on matters of federal constitutional law. So to the extent there are these disputes about whether or not Trump is disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, it's really going to be on the Supreme Court to provide that final word. And once it does, either will allow states to exclude him or close the door and require him essentially to be on the ballot in all 50 states.
There are calls from local lawmakers to impeach Secretary of State Shanna Bellows over her decision to take Trump off the ballot in Maine. But overall, how do you think these efforts in Maine and other states, how are they affecting voters, and what impact could all of this maybe have on future elections?
Yeah, it's really hard to say. On the one hand, voters might be emboldened to say, listen, I'm going to vote for Trump. He's getting judges who are ruling against him, just like he's had these criminal cases and these indictments and whatever they are. It's just the judiciary stacked against him. So maybe they're emboldened. On the other hand, I wonder for some voters whether or not there's lingering doubts in their mind saying, is it just one more thing for Trump? Is it just the drama that we're going to see for the next 4 years rather than implementing policies? Am I risking wasting my vote if I vote for him as opposed to somebody else? So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on voters' minds in different directions. I don't know what those voters are thinking, but certainly something to think about. And then finally, if these states exclude him and keep him off the ballot, if they're successful, or if these pushes continue in other states, I think there's real questions about how this tool might be used in future elections, whether or not other candidates who are involved in other felonies or other acts that are deemed rising to the level of an insurrection, of an attack on the government, whatever we define that as, I think there's going to be a lot more political backlash. I don't know if that's serious. I don't know if it's the kind of thing we want, but one of the problems with these challenges is if they're unprecedented, you never know how they're going to be wielded by others in the future.
We're going to leave it right there. Derek, thank you so much for your time and your insights. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.